After the end of October, every dawn brought a different kind of cold. It wasn't a passing draft or a momentary discomfort. It was a cold that crept in from under the cabin, rose between the floorboards, and left frost inside, right where a house was supposed to protect a family. The children woke up shivering. In the weak morning light, their breath appeared as white smoke inside the room. Sarah wrapped them in blankets, sat them near the fire, and prepared cornmeal porridge. But not even the flames could drive that frozen stiffness from their bodies. The ground beneath the cabin absorbed heat faster than the hearth could give it back. By mid-November, Daniel already had a deep cough that wouldn't leave. The tips of Emma's fingers turned white every time she went out to fetch firewood. Sarah stopped sleeping through the night. She woke every 2 hours to feed the fire, terrified that if the embers died completely, her children might not open their eyes again at dawn. From the outside, no one could see that desperation. The small cabin near Bitterroot Creek looked like just another farmstead in the Montana Territory. Weathered pine logs, a stone chimney sending up a thin line of smoke, a woodpile lean-to against the north wall. Nothing about its appearance hinted at what was happening inside. It was November 1887. Winter had come early to the mountains, and the cold had settled into the valley like a permanent presence. Sarah Hutchins was 32 years old. She was a widow with 2 young children, Emma 8 and Daniel 5. Her husband, a logger, had died the previous spring in a forestry accident. He had left her a modest cabin, outstanding debts at the general store, and a winter she wasn't sure they would survive. By local standards, the cabin was solid. It measured about 4 by 5.5 meters. It was built of pine logs sealed with mortar and had a riverstone chimney that drew reasonably well. The floor sat roughly 15 centimeters above the ground on cedar posts. It wasn't a comfortable house, but it was respectable and, at least in theory, livable. The problem was underneath. That small space beneath the raised floor became a wind tunnel at night. The air howled under the cabin and stole heat through the boards. Even with a fire burning, the water in the basin would freeze solid before morning. Sarah tried everything her neighbors recommended. She packed straw under the floor, hung canvas around the foundation, burned more wood than she could afford. Nothing solved the problem. The cold wasn't coming only from the walls or the door. It was coming from below, constant, invisible, and relentless. How do you protect 2 children from a cold that answers to no known solution? One night, while the wind rattled the cabin shutters, Sarah made a decision. She was going to dig. It wouldn't be a root cellar for storing food, nor a storm shelter for safety. It would be something different, a small room beneath the floor of the cabin itself, a place where the earth could hold the heat, a hollow beyond the reach of the wind, a space where the temperature would remain stable even when the air above turned deadly. Sarah understood something many builders overlooked. 1.5 meters below the surface, the soil of Montana holds a much more constant temperature year-round. It might sit between 7 and 10 degrees Celsius. Still cold, but far warmer than a winter night above ground. If the heat from the cabin slowly sank into that space, the underground room could grow warmer still, without burning more wood. She didn't explain it with technical words. She simply called it staying under the wind. She told no one her plan, not because she wanted to keep a secret, but because she didn't want opinions. She didn't want to hear that it would fail, that it was improper, or that a woman shouldn't be crawling under her own house. She only wanted her children to be warm. Before the next dawn, she lifted 3 floorboards in the northwest corner of the cabin, right under the children's bed. Beneath them, she found packed earth. She took a shovel and began to dig, slowly, carefully. The first 20 centimeters were frozen and heavy as stone, but deeper down the ground softened. There, the soil felt quieter. Sarah wasn't improvising. She had thought it through. The room would measure 2.40 meters long by 180 meters wide, just enough for her to sit upright. She would line the walls with riverstone to prevent collapse and to hold heat. A narrow ladder would allow them to climb down. A small ventilation pipe would rise at an angle through the foundation, so that it looked like part of the drainage. The digging lasted 3 long weeks. Sarah carried every shovelful of earth in a canvas sack, and then spread it in a thin layer across the garden, so no one would notice the volume. Her hands blistered, then hardened. Her back ached with every load. But the hollow grew day by day. By early December, the space was finally large enough for her to stand inside. Then she began placing the stones. They were rounded river rocks she had gathered during the summer, chosen one by one. She stacked them with care and packed smaller stones into the gaps. That way the walls stayed firm. At first the stone felt cold to the touch, but Sarah knew that once the space was warmed, those walls would hold some of the heat. She built a small platform inside for the bedding. She set the ventilation pipe at an upward angle through the cabin's foundation so it resembled a simple drain. For better insulation, she packed the space between the earth and the stone walls with pine needles and bark. Finally, she replaced the floorboards. Only a small trapdoor remained, hidden under a woven rug. From above, the cabin looked exactly the same. Beneath it, however, lay a silent, sheltered, windless space. When the outside temperature dropped near freezing, Sarah ran the first test. She climbed down with a candle and sat inside. The air was a little close, but it was warm enough that her breath no longer turned to mist. It worked. Still, she didn't tell the children yet. Winter had only just begun and the worst was still ahead. Sarah needed a harder test. A cold night or a short stretch of bad weather wasn't enough. She waited for winter to show its true teeth. By mid-December, people in the settlement began noticing that something was going on. They saw Sarah digging, though they didn't know what she was building under her cabin. Old Mr. Calloway saw her one afternoon hauling earth and asked if she was having drainage problems. Sarah answered that she was only improving the foundation. He nodded and went on his way. Two women from the church passed by with jars of preserved apples. They looked at the earth spread near the garden and asked if she was making a cellar. Sarah gave a similar answer. The women exchanged a glance. It was late in the season to be digging. The ground would freeze soon. At the general store, a clerk named Oris mentioned he had heard about her excavations. He warned her that the foundation could shift and the floor might give way. Sarah paid for her lamp oil and candles. Then she left without explanation. No one was unkind to her, but no one truly believed in what she was doing. On December 18th, Sarah made the final decision. She carried the children's bedding down into the underground room. Emma hesitated at the entrance. She said it was dark. Sarah answered that it was warm. Daniel went down first, touched the stone wall, and smiled. He said it wasn't cold. Sarah lit the oil lamp and helped them settle onto the platform. The air was still. There was no wind, no creaking boards, no drafts under the floor. If you've ever wondered how far a simple solution can go when lives depend on it, subscribe. The true test of Sarah's secret room had not yet come, and no one in the settlement expected what was about to happen. The storm arrived on January 11th. At first, it was only a light snowfall. By afternoon, the wind began driving the snow sideways across the valley. When night fell, nothing could be seen. At midnight, the temperature dropped below zero and kept falling. The next day, the thermometer read 28 degrees Celsius. On the third day, it reached 31 degrees Celsius. The wind battered the settlement without rest. Snow piled up once 20 meters against the cabins. Drifts climbed toward the roofs. Firewood lay buried under ice and snow. Green, wet wood wouldn't burn properly. Chimneys clogged, fires smoked, then died. People burned whatever they could find. Furniture, fence posts, anything that would catch. Sarah's woodpile also began shrinking rapidly, even with careful rationing. The cabin could no longer hold the heat. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. Frost spread across the walls. The water bucket froze solid within an hour. On the 8th night, the temperature inside the cabin fell to about 3 degrees Celsius, while the storm still hammered the valley. The fire was still alive, but it was no longer enough. Sarah decided to go down. She banked the fire just enough to keep the chimney warm. She wrapped Emma and Daniel in every blanket she had. Then she guided them down the ladder. Emma carried the oil lamp. Daniel clung to Sarah's skirt. When the trapdoor closed over them, the wind vanished. The underground room was silent. The stone walls stayed dry. The air did not move. Sarah looked at the small thermometer she had hung there. It read 11.7 degrees. Outside, the temperature hovered around 32 degrees C, the wind still howling. They stayed below. For 4 days, the storm roared over the cabin. Sarah climbed up twice a day only to tend to the fire. Each time she opened the trapdoor, the cold cut her breath. She returned shivering to the space underground, and within minutes felt warm again. They ate dried apples and cold cornbread. They told stories. They slept. The children did not cough. They did not shiver. Daniel slept through the night. Emma read by lamplight without her fingers growing numb. At last the storm ended. The settlement began to dig itself out. People cleared paths and visited neighbors to see who needed help. Then they started to realize that something didn't add up. Margaret Briggs was the first to reach Sarah's cabin. She carried a jar of broth and expected to find her exhausted, broken by fear and lack of sleep. Instead, she found her calm. Her children were playing inside normally. The cabin felt warmer than her own. Margaret asked how much wood she had burned during the blizzard. Sarah answered, "Less than expected." Margaret's husband had frostbitten fingers. Their younger son could barely walk from the swelling in his feet. Sarah's children, by contrast, looked healthy. 2 days later, Jacob Stern stopped by. He was the carpenter who had laughed at Sarah's digging. He watched the thin smoke rising from the chimney and asked how she had survived the storm. Sarah told him they had stayed safe from the wind. At first, understanding came slowly. Then it came all at once. Horace, the store clerk, returned with questions. He wanted to know the depth, the kind of stone, the way the air moved. Sarah showed him everything and explained it without flourish. The earth held the heat, the stone stored it, the wind could not reach them down there. Within a week, other families began to dig. The numbers were impossible to ignore. While others had burned 2 or 3 cubic meters of wood and still nearly frozen, Sarah had used less than half a cubic meter. At the end of January, the pastor spoke of it in church. He did not call it a miracle, he called it a lesson. He said that sometimes the simplest answers are the ones people overlook. Jacob apologized to Sarah in public. He said he had been wrong. She only nodded and answered that it had worked for them. By spring, the secret bedroom was no longer a secret. The settlement would never think about shelter in the same way again. In February, the idea had already taken root. 3 families living near Bitterroot Creek began digging under their own cabins. They did not do it because Sarah ordered them to. They did it because they had seen the results with their own eyes. They had seen her children healthy, not spending the night coughing. They had seen Sarah's woodpile lasting, while theirs disappeared. They knew the quiet shame of burning furniture just to stay alive. Jacob Stern, the carpenter who had once mocked her, was the first to finish his own underground room. He followed Sarah's design almost exactly. Dry stacked riverstone walls, tightly packed bark and pine needles, a narrow ladder, and a trapdoor hidden under a rug. When his family spent their first night in that space, his wife wept with relief. The room stayed warm without a roaring fire. The silence felt like safety. Margaret Briggs could not dig under her cabin because the foundation was too shallow. Instead, she built a partially buried room against the north wall. She sank it a meter into the earth with stone walls and a sawn timber roof. It was not perfect, but it worked. Her children stopped waking with numb hands. The change spread without big meetings or announcements. Here and there, you simply heard the sound of shovels striking earth. By the following winter, 7 families had some version of Sarah's idea. Some dug full rooms. Others made small sleeping spaces. Some combined them with root cellars, using the same place to store food and to shelter from the cold. Each design changed according to the soil, the available stone, or the water they hit while digging. But the principle was always the same. Let the earth do the work. The difference showed quickly. Firewood lasted longer. Chimneys cracked less often. Fewer children fell ill from spending winter inside smoke-filled cabins. People stopped pushing their stoves past the point of safety just to gain a little more heat. The settlement felt another change as well. Winter was still hard, but they were less desperate. The storm still came. The snow still covered the valley. But fear no longer ruled every cold night. Sarah never claimed credit. She answered when someone asked. She showed the room if necessary. She explained it in the simplest way possible. 1.5 meters down, the earth does not change. Stone holds heat. Wind steals it. You have to stay under the wind. That was all. In the spring of 1889, a man from another settlement passed through and saw a trapdoor. He asked what it was. Sarah explained. The man listened carefully. He said his family suffered every winter and wanted to know if the idea could work where he lived. Sarah answered that the ground was the same everywhere. What changed was how you dug. The little cabin near Bitterroot Creek had once held a quiet secret. Now the warmth of the earth was beginning to spread and change entire communities. By the early 1890s, similar underground sleeping spaces began appearing in Wyoming and the Dakotas. Some were dug deep, others were only half buried. Some used stone, others used wood. The exact form varied, but the fundamental principle remained the same. Even agricultural agents started recommending partially buried shelters for barns and workshops to farmers. Not because the idea was new, but because it worked. Sarah's children grew up thinking that sleeping underground in winter was normal. Her daughter Emma later built a similar space under her own farm in Idaho. Her son Daniel became a stonemason and used semi-buried designs in public buildings around Missoula. He never called it an invention. To him, it was simply common sense. Sarah remarried in 1894. Her new husband slept in the underground room without a single complaint. He said it was warmer than the house he had grown up in. The room remained. It was no longer a secret. It was simply another part of the cabin. Seen from a distance, nothing Sarah did was truly revolutionary. Humanity had lived underground for thousands of years. Pit houses, dugout shelters, and earth-covered dwellings had existed in many parts of the world. What Sarah did was remember something frontier life was beginning to forget. The ground was not an enemy. It was a refuge. While others raised higher walls and burned more wood, she looked downward. She trusted the earth beneath her feet. The result was not comfort. It was survival. Roughly 13 degrees Celsius constant during the worst storm in 40 years. Half the firewood burned. And 2 children who came through the winter without fear. Sarah Hutchins never set out to change the way people built. She only wanted her children to be warm. But a quiet decision made on a freezing night changed the way an entire settlement understood shelter. Sometimes the smartest answers are not new. Sometimes they have been waiting all along, right under your feet. If this kind of forgotten wisdom interests you, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what old technique do you think we've forgotten that could still have a use almost no one has noticed?